One arrogant banker, one calm black woman. What he destroyed with a shredder, she reclaimed with ownership, and a lesson he'll never forget. The afternoon sun draped downtown Atlanta in sheets of gold, turning glass towers into mirrors of light. Among them stood Unity National Bank, its silver logo gleaming, a monument to power, prestige, and the quiet pride of those who thought they owned the city. Inside, the air was cool and perfumed with wealth. Espresso, leather chairs, and ambition. Every sound was deliberate. The rhythmic clicking of heels, the rustle of crisp papers, the low hum of polite conversation masking quiet superiority. Through the revolving doors stepped Angela Porter, her posture straight, her eyes steady. The light caught her brown skin and made it glow against her cream blazer. In her hands, she held a simple folder. Neat, organized, and filled with dreams carved from hard work. It wasn't just paper. It was the blueprint of something bigger. The Haven Center, a project meant to lift single mothers out of debt and into independence. As she crossed the marble floor, a few heads turned. She wasn't loud, she wasn't flashy, but her presence carried weight. There was purpose in her steps, quiet fire in her calm. Angela didn't come to beg. She came to build, and the walls of Unity National Bank were about to remember her name. Mr. Collins greeted her with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. His suit was flawless, his tie perfectly knotted, every inch of him designed to project authority. "Ms. Porter, isn't it?" he said smoothly, gesturing toward the chair across from his immaculate desk. His tone was polite, almost warm, but there was something behind it. A practiced superiority, the kind that weighed every visitor by the color of their skin before a single word was spoken. Angela sat, her folder resting neatly on her lap. She spoke with quiet conviction, explaining her vision. The Haven Center, a financial literacy program to help single mothers rebuild their futures. As she spoke, her words painted a picture of empowerment and hope. But Collins barely listened. He leaned back, tapping his pen, a faint smirk curling his lips. "Ambitious," he interrupted, voice dripping with false concern. "Perhaps too ambitious." Angela's fingers tightened on the folder. "If you'll just review my documents..." He sighed, taking the folder as if it weighed more than it should. Without even opening it, he stood, walked to the shredder, and fed her dreams to the machine. The paper screamed as it was torn apart. "We don't process fantasies here, ma'am," he said coolly. "Try a community credit union instead." The shredder hummed, then stopped. The silence that followed was louder than anything Angela had ever heard. For a long moment, the only sound in the room was the faint hum of the shredder cooling down. Angela didn't move. Her hands rested gently on her lap, her eyes fixed on the thin line of shredded paper curling at Mr. Collins's feet. He expected outrage, a raised voice, a trembling lip, maybe even tears. That was how humiliation usually played out here, but Angela only inhaled slowly, her composure so still it felt sacred. When she finally lifted her gaze, her eyes met his with a quiet steadiness that made him shift in his chair. There was no anger there, no brokenness, only clarity. She stood, smoothed her blazer, and reached for her bag. Every movement was deliberate, graceful, almost regal. Then, in a voice soft enough to make him lean forward to hear, she said, "Thank you for showing me exactly what I needed to see." For the first time, Collins couldn't think of a reply. He forced a smirk, hiding the flicker of discomfort that crossed his face as she turned and walked away. Her heels clicked against the marble, measured, unwavering, final. He leaned back, exhaling sharply, certain he'd put her in her place. But what he didn't know was that she had just found her own. Outside, the world was still drenched in sunlight, warm, indifferent, almost cruel in its brightness. Angela stepped out of the bank's glass doors, the sound of the city swelling around her. Car horns, footsteps, life moving on as if nothing had happened. She paused at the edge of the curb, her face unreadable. Then she reached into her bag and pulled out her phone. Her fingers moved with calm precision as she dialed a number. The conversation was brief, just a few words, quiet and steady. The camera couldn't hear her, but it saw the change. The soft calm in her expression hardened into something else. Resolve, sharp and certain. Moments later, a sleek black car pulled up. The driver stepped out quickly, opening the door with a respectful nod. Angela slid in without a word, the door closing with a muted thud that carried more weight than any argument ever could. As the car merged into traffic, the reflection of the bank shimmered on its tinted windows. Cold, metallic, unaware of what was coming. Inside the bank, the shredded pieces of her proposal lay twisted in the trash bin. The camera lingered on them, lifeless and torn, a mockery of her dream, or perhaps the ashes from which something far greater was about to rise. Back inside Unity National Bank, the rhythm of the afternoon had shifted. The once assured hum of the lobby now carried a strange, uneasy stillness like the air before a storm. Mr. Collins sat at his desk, flipping through papers he wasn't reading, his smug expression half formed when the phone rang. "Collins speaking," he said briskly. A pause, then another. The voice on the other end made his brow tighten. By the time he hung up, the color had drained from his face. Something in his world had tilted, and he didn't yet understand how far it would fall. Moments later, the elevator chimed. Heads turned. Conversation stilled. Angela Porter stepped into the lobby once more, this time not alone, but beside the chairman of the bank himself. Their steps were in sync, her presence commanding the room with quiet authority. The chairman's voice carried across the marble floor, calm and measured. "Everyone, please meet Ms. Angela Porter, our new majority shareholder. The acquisition was finalized this morning." Silence. Not disbelief, shock. Collins stood frozen, his mouth slightly open. Angela turned toward him, her expression unchanged, serene, steady. "Now," she said softly, "let's talk about improving how we treat our clients." Her tone was gentle, but the entire bank felt the weight of power shift. The tension in the boardroom hung thick as the truth settled. Mr. Collins stood rigid, his polished composure cracked, the weight of humiliation pressing down on him harder than he'd ever dealt it out. Around him, executives murmured softly, eyes darting between him and Angela, the woman he had dismissed, degraded, and now stood powerless before. Angela remained seated at the head of the long mahogany table, her hands folded neatly, her gaze calm but unflinching. There was no gloating in her expression, no trace of vengeance, only clarity. When she finally spoke, her voice carried quiet authority. "Every word deliberate, Mr. Collins," she said. "You won't be dismissed." He blinked, unsure if he'd heard correctly. "Instead," she continued, "you'll lead our new division, head of community outreach. You'll be responsible for funding minority-owned startups and mentoring young entrepreneurs from underrepresented backgrounds." Her tone was even, but the irony was unmistakable. The man who had shredded her dreams would now be tasked with nurturing others. He swallowed hard, nodding stiffly. Angela offered a small, measured smile, not of triumph, but of purpose. "Redemption," she said softly, "is a privilege. Make it count." The room fell silent, and for the first time, Mr. Collins truly understood what power wrapped in grace looked like. The city glowed beneath the fading sun, its skyline bathed in amber and gold. From the top floor of Unity National Bank, Angela stood by the wide glass window, the world stretching out before her, vast, alive, and finally within reach. Her reflection looked back at her, not with pride, but with quiet peace. Behind her, the once cold office now carried warmth. On the wall hung a simple frame. Inside it, the shredded remnants of her proposal, carefully arranged like art. The same pieces that had once been torn apart now stood as a testament to everything she had reclaimed. A soft voice filled the room. Her voice, steady and reflective. Some people destroy what they don't understand. But power doesn't always shout. Sometimes it walks in grace, waits in silence, and returns with ownership. Outside, the city lights flickered to life, small sparks against the coming night, just like the people she hoped to lift through her work. Angela smiled faintly, her hand resting on the framed shards of her past. They no longer represented humiliation. They symbolized rebirth. She turned back to the window, her silhouette outlined by the glow of evening. Justice had been served, not with revenge, but with grace. True strength isn't in revenge. It's in rising so high that the ones who tried to silence you must listen. Dignity, patience, and self-belief can turn humiliation into history.